Hello, YouTube, and welcome to another Bucket List Gamers mini review. I am Jay, and as always, I'm joined by Eddie.
Hello.
And today we are looking at a PlayStation 5 game rather than a Steam PC game. It is available on Steam as well, if that's more your thing, but we played it on PS5. And it is The Tale of Bistun, or Bistun. We're not 100% sure. We think it's Bistun. And that is by, again, we're not sure of the publisher. It's imgn.pro. We assume it's Imagine Pro pronounced, but again, not 100% sure. And it's developed by Black Cube Games. I haven't actually played this one in a reversal from our usual episodes. Eddie's played this one, and I've watched the footage and digested what was going on in it for a good 20 minutes. And I think the first thing to say is it looks incredibly professionally done. I wouldn't say AAA, but it doesn't look like an indie game, does it? The title screen looks great, the music's fantastic, the gameplay looks great, the voiceover work in particular, which there is a lot of, which we'll come to, all sounds brilliant. It is a very polished product.
Yeah, it'd be something you'd expect a AAA company to do as one of their indie projects. So is it is it the Song of the Sea or the Tale of the Sea that EA did a couple of years back, that's about a young girl whose dad goes missing and she builds an underwater submersible to go find him, basically. And that was EA, but it was one of their little indie companies that they'd acquired, that they'd kept as a team, and they've used EA's parent company money to make and build the game. And that kind of feels what this looks like. It's very pretty, and there's not been any glitches at all that I've seen so far.
Yeah.
It's not crashed. I've not had any sort of pop-in or anything like that. It's very stylized, I will say that. It's a bit... The main character reminds me of something like a Playmobil character.
Yeah.
Because there's no eyes or anything like that on the character model. It's very stylized, almost like it was made out of clay.
Yeah.
But without the rough edges. It's sort of the Playmobil standard of all the edges smoothed off. And it plays really smoothly as well.
So it's based on a Persian myth, I think. Is the whole plot behind it. And as you may or may not be able to tell from the footage that's playing currently, depending on whether I've had to mute the volume or not, it's very, very wordy. Every few steps, it's telling you more story, isn't it, as you play through it? And it's all done the voiceover work is fantastic, I think, for this. When I was watching it the first time through and you sent me the footage, I was like, this is the quality of the voiceover work is unbelievable. Like, and to have that much in it as well. This guy that read it must have had like a 200-page script based on the 20 minutes or so I've watched, because he never stops, does he? He's always got some exposition while you're doing something on screen.
Yeah, and even the initial voiceover, I think it's of one of the goddesses that's telling the story, basically. The lady that does the voiceover is actually a really well-known Iranian American actress. I do not want to butcher her name, so she has done acting in things like Renfield, The Wheel of Time, things like that. She was in Star Trek. She's got a very, very raspy, distinctive voice. As soon as you hear her, the back of my head went, I know that voice from somewhere.
Yeah.
And then looked it up, and then I was like, oh yeah, that does make sense. That computes now. But yeah, the voice work is incredible, and the main actor's voice is something you could probably fall asleep to. I think if he read The Myth of Bistun to me on like an audio tape, I'd be out.
Yeah.
It'd just be something nice to fall asleep to. He's got such a good timbre to his voice.
You're right. It's like almost like a lullaby, like the cadence of how he reads the lines while you're doing it, and the fact you've got something to do while he's doing it, I suppose, is the only thing that stops you from drifting off and just getting really fully immersed in the story. And the gameplay itself, the only criticism I would have, and I didn't play it, so you'll have to let me know whether this becomes a problem or not, is that it all looks very far away. like the camera is always very far away, so you can see it, and it's impressive because, like you say, no popping or anything at all in the footage, as far as I can remember, that will be playing underneath us. But it all just looks like it's dragged back a bit too much, and you'd want it just slightly closer.
Yeah, I always find this with isometric games. They are either too close, so you can't see further than like the immediate area around you when you may necessarily want to pull it back just a tiny bit just to get a bit of a better view, or they're pulled back so far that you lose a sense of attachment to the action. And I think this is where Bistun sort of falls into.
Hmm.
It is the isometric camera is pulled so far back. I found myself dodging, and I'll come back to the dodge mechanic in a minute. I found myself dodging into projectiles and enemy attacks more than I ended up dodging away from them, because the enemies are, some of them are quite small, the little imps that sort of hound you and only take a couple of hits, but they can still knock chunks off your health bar.
Hmm.
And then there are these big lumbering sort of golem enemies, and they take a lot of health off. But knowing whether you're rolling between its legs or into the massive club that it's about to smash you with is sort of left in the hands of the little baby Jesus sometimes because of how far back the camera's pulled.
And it doesn't need to be, I think, is the annoying thing. Like, you don't need to see that far ahead of where you're going, do you? It could be a lot tighter on the main character, and you'd still be able to see enough to carry on playing it. It reminded me a bit of just, I think, because of the isometric element of it and the way you traverse the landscape. Oh God, what was it called? The one where you play a crow, and it's all about
Oh, Death's
death.
Door.
Yeah, it gave me that sort of vibe to the landscapes. They're a bit more detailed, aren't they? Because Death's Door is very, very like retro
Cell
graphics
shaded.
into, yeah. Whereas this has a lot more detail to the landscapes. But the way you sort of climb up the rocks and edge along ledges, and you go through and you encounter the enemies, it gave me that vibe. And I think if they'd have gone with that depth of camera, you'd have probably been a little bit better off.
Yeah, I think because there isn't any puzzle
Mm,
solving requirements, everything is one button interaction. Essentially, the main character is an amnesiac statue carver, and the most amount of interaction you do is either attacking stuff with the weapons that you've got, or there will be a triangle key will pop up on your screen when you're near a rock outcrop, and you can tap triangle a couple of times and he will craft a statue that you can then investigate, and it will give you more exposition.
okay.
But there's no puzzles really, so I think they were under the impression that they didn't need to have such a tight focus, because Death's Door, there are some sort of tricky puzzles in it where you have to either push blocks or you have to work out the right series of actions to take or levers to
Yeah,
flick
yeah.
and stuff like that. It's not so much for this, but it doesn't do it any favors when it comes to the combat.
Yeah.
And to your point, the combat is broken up by quite extensive stretches of walking to the next area where the combat's going to happen
While it tells you the story, basically.
while it tells you the story. So yeah, there's no real need to have it pulled out that far. The scenery, you are looking down on it, so it's not like you can admire the skybox. You can just admire the detail that they put into the wider scenery, but you're going there anyway, so you're gonna see it at some point. But I think that outside of that, the only flaw I have found with it is the fact that the dodge, there is a little pause, and it's a little bit longer than it needs to be between each dodge. And I know
Yeah.
they don't want you cartwheeling around the levels like a fucking lunatic, because sometimes some games make it so that the fastest way of traveling is not to run and not
Yeah.
to walk. It's to essentially dodge roll, and you just get into a really bad habit of just dodge rolling everywhere because it's the quickest method of travel. But it's just on the longer side of it that makes it annoying.
Yeah.
So you do a little dodge, you pause, and then you can dodge again, and it just, there's not much in the way of invincibility frames. So you roll, you stop, you are then completely vulnerable to whatever it is that's heading your way. I mean, I get it. He's not some master swordsman. He's just some guy that can't remember what's gone on, and he knows he's a sculptor. That's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, so thematically, it's probably right that he's not that good at dodging, but it's just slightly frustrating when you need to dodge, I suppose,
Yeah.
and you can't immediately do it. I think Ocarina of Time's a bad one, isn't it, for the dodge roll being the fastest way to get
Yeah.
around, and the fact they put that obnoxious like shout noise every time you do it, or like the grunt. So you just, if somebody's playing it in the background, all you can hear is like grunt, grunt, grunt as they roll along. But yeah, I think this one is one of the prettiest games I think we've been given to review so far. Which isn't to say that some of the other ones haven't looked great as well, but this one just, it is stunning, isn't it? In what they've done with it. And yeah, I think if you're into story driven narratives in particular, and you love that whole, like, if you're the type of person that loves Red Dead 2 because you get to ride the horse in between missions and listen to story for like 45 minutes, you'll love this. Although there might not be enough exposition in it for you if that's the kind of thing you're into. But yeah, if you love a good plot that is driven by lots of narration, lots of really strong narration. I mean, this isn't like Montezuma's Revenge that I played where he's just sticking his neb in all the time and it distracts from the actual game so you can't tell what he's saying. This is solid narration that will talk you through this story, and it almost is like a walking sim that's telling a story, but then they've added some nice combat and some nice platformer in, isn't it, to complement it. I think that is what I got from watching the footage anyway. I don't know if that's how it feels to play it.
Yeah, and I think when you're making this sort of game with the intention of telling this kind of story, I think this is the only way you can do it.
Yeah.
I think if you're planning on telling like a massive sweeping epic in a AAA God of War style thing, then you can sort of break it up with cutscenes, and because the camera is sort of over the shoulder, you're more in the action.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is built on dialogue between characters, but realistically speaking, the Bistun is the only character in it. There are other NPCs that you can talk to and have dialogue with as the story progresses, but for most part, it is just you traveling alone. And I
Yeah.
think having a constant narration over the top is the only way you're going to be able to sell this story, particularly with myth.
Yeah. The opposite way to do it would be like Hades, wouldn't it? But Hades doesn't actually tell the stories of those like myths and stuff. It's just based on them. Whereas this is actually telling you, it's teaching you essentially, isn't it?
Yeah.
This myth, this Persian myth, which is a really nice thing because I find that kind of thing fascinating. I know as a student of mythology and such, you enjoy that kind of thing as well. So it was almost like the perfect game for you to start with as your first like solo play. And yeah, I think if you're into that kind of thing and you want that nice split between, I can listen to this really nice story and I don't have to put on a video on social media or something while I'm playing this game because there's enough in it to keep my attention while I play.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's not one of those that have like either no music or it's just like Borderlands when it's just constantly the same noises happening in the background and just a stream of constant gunfire and
Yeah.
death screams. So you just put on a podcast while you sort of zone out. This you'd actually, I think, would make a very good podcast. To be fair, just a single voiceover narration
Yeah.
with the odd other individual sort of taking the parts of the other characters within it. I'm trying not to spoil.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because it is a story that if you knew it already, I suppose would take a little bit away from playing through it. A large chunk of it is absorbing that story, isn't it, while you play through.
I think it's definitely worth the price, especially Steam at the minute. It's £5.
Yeah, 62% sale on it as we speak. Whether that will last. 15 quid on Switch. So again, not out of the way, is it? It's not an overly expensive thing to buy. 11.99 on PlayStation as we speak. So for just over a tenner, I think there's a good amount of content in it, and you're going to learn something, and it looks fantastic as well. And like you say, celebrity voiceovers in the beginning bit, so it's not just somebody phoning it in, it's somebody that knows what they're doing, and that does come across when you play it. Yeah, it gets a recommend from us, and unless you've got anything else to add,
No, that was it.
I will say that is goodbye from me.
That's goodbye from me.
All Seeds was asleep. A huge pomegranate hung from a branch. The mountain, Farhad. You must dig. I need you here.